All right, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, June the 15th, 2022, and we have quite a bit to report for you folks. But before we do that, I just want to let everybody know that this coming Friday at 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, again, that's 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we will be doing our first rabbit hole deep dive stream. Now, I do want to say that I will be leaving this stream up after the stream is over for those that want to get a little bit of a sneak peek pertaining to what this sort of series is going to be about. Now, friendly reminder that after this particular stream, in 2 to 3 weeks from now, when we do our next rabbit hole multi-hour deep dive stream, it will be available for all of those publicly who attend live in real time, and then it will be taken down after the stream is over, put into clips in smaller segments for the public, but then the actual full stream will be available for Patreon members. Again, I'm doing my absolute best to try and keep the bills paid, while also trying my best to cater to those that want to sign up for the Patreon, but because of personal situations pertaining to finances cannot. And so truly I'm trying to do my best to sort of find the middle ground in that regard. Now, with that being said, let's delve into the Kraken. We have quite a few things to catch up on, and I think what we're seeing here is an overall encompassing state of both worry, anxiety, fear, and a little bit of positivity in some cases from world leaders. Now, again, I'm even hesitant to call them world leaders, but in the context of the prominence of what we're discussing politically, we'll just stick with those labels for the sake of it. So first and foremost, UK academics at almost 100 universities are being trained in, quote, effectively cancelling others in the name of social and racial justice, end quote, according to the telegraph.co.uk. I want to be very clear pertaining to, if I were to give my opinion in this regard, I know a lot of you like to hear it, but if I were to give my opinion right off the bat after reporting this, let's take a step back. Let's sort of zoom out on the macro in a certain regard. And let's think, it would be no different than you watching CNN or Fox or something like this, or listening to NPR, because yes, although I would make it clear it's my opinion, many of you as the audience would potentially, and understandably so, feel inclined to agree with me. Maybe because, again, maybe you like my personality, maybe you like the show, so you're willing to give up a little bit of that, I guess you could say, independent thinking in order to lean towards a particular view that someone that you both ideologically and literally subscribe to holds, which is why I will not be giving my opinion on that, because again, the point of this news segment is not to, I know you folks like to hear my take, but it's again, to report things as neutrally as possible relative to as accurate as I can get without leaning in either direction of, oh, this is good folks or this is bad. Trying to do my best, and pertaining to a situation like that, with respects to these universities trying to train people in effectively canceling, at least based on the quotations here as the Telegraph has quoted and cited, social and racial justice and things like this. Again, not saying that we should go back to how things were many years ago, or 5, 10, 15 years ago, but at the same time, I think what's needed is a paradigm shift. Now, in what regard, in what direction, it's not for me to say. It's not that I want to jump in and give my, stir the pot and then leave and then just be like, oh, I'm just asking questions. Not in that regard, but more so, I think one of the problems that has led to things like this is to what we just reported, in maybe I'm wrong, but is that the technology is moving much faster than the culture. The technology is moving faster than we as individuals, as I guess you could say, organic life forms, if you will, can keep up with. And I think that's a very significant problem. Now, with that being said, anything beyond that would just be, again, my opinion, and I don't want to sway you guys, so let's move on. The next thing is that senators have reached a deal on new gun legislation in the United States, the first one in 30 years. According to Axios.com, 10 Republicans have signed on, which makes it immune to a filibuster. The Republicans that I believe signed on were, let's see here, Toomey, Romney, Portman, Graham, Collins, Cassidy, Burr, Blunt, Tillis, and Cornyn. So again, I'm not going to get into too much of the microscopic details of which, again, why these senators may have done or what have you, whether we zoom in or we zoom out. And I say this with respects to even, again, strategical chess games being that of a sort of tit-for-tat type move with the pawns in the chess game being innocent people. So again, now I also want to mention as well, I don't mean to allude to, the Uvalde shooting or any other shooting for that matter, but whenever a decision is made, it is always because of the consequence or initial action that then leads to some type of ripple effect that then each individual in politics needs to strategically analyze for, unfortunately, their own self-interest, even though in theory they have been, elected to serve the people, us. That is clearly not the case, and I don't think it needs to. I think it goes without saying at this point in time. So, again, at least putting ourselves in the perspectives of these individuals, it's strategy, selfish strategy, I would say so. But again, nonetheless, strategy in this regard, in my opinion. I could be wrong. The next thing is that Bitcoin dropped below 27,000 US dollars per share or per coin, and then shortly after that, it extended its losses below $23,000 per share, which was down over 13% relative to the time of its initial drop at the 27,000 mark, and it is now at its lowest price range since December 2020. Ethereum and other major altcoins are also trading deep in the red zone, and shortly after that, Binance, one of the largest crypto exchanges in the world, temporarily halted Bitcoin withdrawals, and the CEO says that they are, quote, fixing an issue, end quote. Now, pertaining to the way in which this may or may not be effectuated if, Binance were to be regulated per se, I don't want to say, well, I'm not an expert on this, so forgive me, I'm not an economist, I'm not even a crypto, analyst expert, you name it, but I'm not someone that looks into this stuff just because I'm focusing so much on the science angle of things pertaining to the show. But the idea here is that ultimately when I look at something like this, I kind of say to myself, all right, if they were to be regulated or if they were to have their own form of regulations or something of this kind or what have you, what would be any different than when, the whole GameStop AMC situation happened where they froze trading? Because again, the average person, I believe this was last year, the average person, a bunch of average persons rather got together and sort of the whole David and Goliath type situation occurred. And so trading was frozen to protect the ones at the top. And again, arguably, allegedly, I got to say that, but we all know where that leads in that regard. So the question then becomes, okay, if they're truly fixing an issue, for those that say, well, if you're really fixing an issue, maybe you should become more regulated. Well, then at that point, maybe I'm totally wrong here, but then what is the point? What's the point between that and say that the petrodollar? Right. So again, there's that. There's a lot of things that are very interesting as well, too, pertaining to, China claiming that is particularly the CCP, of course, not the people of China, that if I'm not mistaken, if I can recall correctly off the top of my head, they claim to have developed technology that can prevent blockchain from being integrated with other elements of the blockchain, I think, or something like this, something with, quantum computing, the blockchain memory, all this kind of stuff, that there's been some type of revelatory announcement pertaining to that. But anyways, the next thing is that the Washington Post has, according to the Washington Post, the Pfizer biotech 3-dose mRNA injection for children under the age of 5 is, quote, safe and effective, end quote, the FDA staff claimed on Sunday based on preliminary data ahead of Wednesday's meeting. So again, make of that as you will. I know a lot of you folks like to hear my opinion on that, particularly jabs and children, but I think I've voiced my opinion in previous months, and although I may say that I may, looking back, maybe have gone a tad too aggressive, and even again, my version of aggressive is really not aggressive compared to what people have told me when they listen to other shows. So again, the idea, though, is that I say aggressive relative to attempting to report things neutrally. And again, I'm going to kind of leave that there for those, because not as a cop-out answer, but I think that ultimately what we're seeing here is a personal choice at this point in time, pertaining to whether you want your child to have it or yourself or something like this. So I'll leave that there. The next thing is that Argentina has recorded the coldest autumn since 1976, according to data from the National Meteorological Service. I'm going to be honest with you folks, and I'm not trying to actually know, well, maybe I am. I think the idea here is to question the validity of such institutions, and I don't mean to single out, for example, the NMS, the National Meteorological Service, but again, when we look, for example, I'm not saying that they're lying, I'm not saying that at all. I want to believe such institutions, but we see, for example, recently the amount of, dare I say, blunders, I want to say that carefully for the sake of YouTube, that has occurred with institutions, not specifically NMS, but institutions in that regard, and within that sort of general orbit. So again, I'm not saying that they are lying, nor am I saying they're telling the truth, to be fair. I just question it entirely. And I'm not trying to make a conspiracy theory out of that, to be very clear, particularly for the folks on YouTube that may be watching this, more so the people at YouTube. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a viewpoint that's different than what a particular institution reports. I mean, it could speak to the questioning and the validity and the veracity of that institution. But again, I think that kind of falls into the free speech area. So the next thing is that China's President Xi has ordered the introduction of a legal framework to deploy troops in, quote, a non-war military actions, end quote. That's interesting. I'm going to be honest. Personally, my take on that, I'm not a fan of that, but I don't think, regardless of your political perspectives, you see, here's the thing. As we know, and let's not kid ourselves here, regardless of your personal political perspectives, what leaders say compared to what they actually do, even the words that are labeled on bills or laws or what have you, compared to what is actually executed, is very rarely one and the same. There's usually a major divide between what is entailed and described that is going to be done, and then what is actually done. So again, make of that as you see fit. It's not for me to lean in either direction as to the justification or substantiation of, quote, non-war military actions, end quote. So I'll leave that there. The next thing is that the German military, is going to set up a central command for territorial defense in Berlin from October 1st. I'm not going to pretend like I know the context of that. I just immediately think, again, what's going on behind the scenes in an intelligence perspective. I could be wrong, but that's the farthest in which I would dive into, because beyond that we can speculate and we can, use our imagination and whatever, and it'll just never end. So the next thing is that US stocks plunge in early trading amid rising inflation. Again, I'm not an economist, wanted to report that for the sake of those that are interested in sort of keeping their finger on the pulse a little bit in that regard, but again, we'll move on from that. The next thing is that Ukraine has banned the export of coal, fuel oil, and domestically produced natural gas. Speaking of which, Libya, according to oilprice.com, shut down nearly all of its oil fields, putting further strain on an already undersupplied oil market. So, again, when I see things like this, I think of, particularly, and I could be wrong, but I think of intelligence strategy behind the scenes. What's going on that is causing this? What developments covertly or in a clandestine manner that was not reported in the media in any metric, whether alternative or mainstream media, you name it, what set of events or developments or actions caused the lead up to this, if any? That's usually where my mind goes. The next thing is that Canada's Prime Minister Trudeau has been infected with COVID again. Yes, finally, as of the day I'm recording this, it is now official that we can now, as a Canadian being here in Manitoba, in Canada, we can now fly domestically without needing a vaccine passport or without needing to be vaccinated or jabbed. This is the thing as well, too, pertaining to my issue, which is that I believe we're one of the last countries, if I'm not mistaken, the last country, I could be incorrect about that, however, to drop this rule pertaining to fly domestically. I mean, again, putting a number of other facets aside pertaining to this whole COVID situation, whether it's the alleged sickness itself or the virus itself or the vaccine, there were a lot of decisions made that seemed quite illogical. Now, again, to play devil's advocate, there's the justification of, when you're working with logistics and in very rapid moving situations, or as they say, fluid situations that are changing in real time. It's not, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that our leaders should have, actually, no, I am trying to say they should have been on the ball way more relative to the resources they have. So yeah, I mean, okay, if you want my take there it is in that regard, because I say this because there were times when allegedly the virus was spreading far more rampantly. And you were allowed to fly domestically within Canada, say to go from, Vancouver to Toronto or Toronto to Montreal or Montreal to Vancouver without needing a vaccine passport or anything like this. So yeah, I'm just glad that, the domestic side of it has dropped in that regard. So the next thing is that a U.S. 10-year yield surges to 3.35%, the highest since 2011, indicating a potential debt market meltdown. Again, not an economist, but I do want to keep those that are interested in the markets and things like that with their finger on the pulse to the extent in which I can understand some of this lingo, if you will. Although I've been told that, the lingo that Wall Street uses is very similar to the lingo that is used within, I guess you could say, certain elements of other areas of academia, which is that, only these people can do what they do. For example, Wall Street. Only let the experts on Wall Street deal with this kind of stuff, when in reality, define an expert. This is what I mean about questioning. In a healthy manner, in a good faith manner, not a bad faith manner. But again, so... The next thing is that Fox News host, according to BusinessInsider.com, Sean Hannity asked Trump to pardon Hunter Biden in a bid to, quote, smooth things over. It's been alleged that, according to Business Insider, Sean Hannity suggested that Trump pardon Hunter Biden after the January 6th report to sort of allegedly ease the optics on Trump. So, again, relative to the incoming administration. I'm going to kind of leave that there. Again, as I see this, it's tit for tat strategy. I think we have far more prominent issues to be concerned about in even our day-to-day lives, my day-to-day life, your day-to-day life, all of that. So when I see things like this, I kind of just, in a particular way, I don't want to say laugh, but I think, again, I think there's far more resourceful and useful articles that could have been written instead of this one. But again, that just goes, it speaks to the larger picture, of clicks, views, the whole thing. So the next thing is that tornado sirens have been blaring in Chicago as severe weather moves in. Citizens are asked to get to safety immediately. Again, there's a lot of moving parts that seem to enable certain weather phenomenon that normally would not occur. Not saying in this case, but in general. So I'm going to leave that there and kind of let you take that as you will. And I mean that because again, to be fair, I've never, I don't live in Chicago. It wouldn't be fair for me to say, I understand what's going on. So again, I'll leave that there. The next thing is that according to libsoftiktok.com, and I want to be very clear that this is according to libsoftiktok.com for the sake of the attemptedly neutral reporting, a Twitter employee said in a leaked chat, and I quote, "We successfully deplatformed Trump. I don't think deplatforming libs of TikTok is going to cause a mass exodus," end quote. Again, I'm not trying to create any type of emotional direction to lean towards pro-Trump, nor, to be fair, pro-Biden, pro-right, nor pro-left. I would say this if it was the other way around as well. The point I'm trying to make here is the fact that there's this duality, that seems to be constantly going back and forth. Speaks to me on the macro and the big picture when we zoom out. When does it end and how does it end? For what? For the sake of just getting back at people? And to me, that speaks to, again, human ego. And then, of course, we can talk about the whole angle there philosophically and ontologically about, the archons and all of this. But again, not to delve into that too extensively since this is a news episode. But I don't think it's out there to say that there definitely is something, whether in this material world or otherwise, that is influencing us to take sort of an emotional, immediate response to picking a side immediately instead of taking a step back and observing, thinking. Not particularly removing emotion, but honing it and then rechanneling that emotion in a more useful manner, if that makes sense. So, speaking of which, according to channelnewsasia.com, taking an extra day off to grow food is going to be a thing in Sri Lanka. The Sri Lankan government has told its civil servants as it struggles with its worst financial crisis in decades. So again, take an extra day off to grow food. We see, for example, I believe, I'm not sure if this is, forgive me if this is not the exact country, I could be incorrect, but I think it's Pakistan. And again, if not, I deeply apologize. A certain nation that I just saw in a headline from The Guardian basically said that the governments and the media, local media, are telling people to drink less tea because of these shortages that are occurring. So again, it's kind of like the Reuters or Business Insider or the Insider article about, a handful of months ago, drive less. You don't, don't get me wrong. I understand the need for moderation relative to the way that we as humans globally consume things. I'm not saying that we're very well observed and well managed consumers, not even close. But at the same time, okay, I'll give you an example. I was on the phone with my younger brother from Toronto, and he said to me at the beginning of 2020 to fill up my Toyota 2004 or 5 Toyota Camry was $35-40 Canadian dollars, which is probably about 25-30 American. And now, I kid you not, to fill up the tank, 140 Canadian dollars. So again, that regardless of the political affiliations or views you may lean to, even ideologically. That should tell you so much more than anything else, in my humble opinion, which speaks to me personally as we as humans globally on the surface, all around the world, the surface world at least, have a lot more in common than we may think, which speaks to a potential effort to constantly distract us. Again, I say this carefully, as meticulously as I can, relative to not attempting to influence you folks, genuinely. So, the next thing is that Russia's Gazprom has reduced gas deliveries to Germany via Nord Stream 1 by 40% due to, quote, delayed repairs, end quote. Again, I would personally... The delayed repairs is an excuse, it's BS, but again, this is strategy, sort of sticking the thumb in the eye to Germany. I could be wrong, that's just my opinion, but again, speaking of which, we will see here as well that Russia's Gazprom partially cut gas flows to Italy today without providing a reason, the oil giant Eni says. In addition to that, Russia's Gazprom also suspended a second compressor of the Nord Stream pipeline, reducing natural gas flows to Germany by 60%. To only 67 million cubic meters per day. There's a lot of speculation that, again, the war in Ukraine is going to have to be conceded from that of the Ukrainians or the West or what have you, that this is not a winnable war in that regard. Now, again, if I'm not on the ground, I don't want to state with any definitive conclusion or speculation what is going on there. But at the same time, I mean... I'll be honest, I'm keeping my finger on the pulse. I'm speaking with some people in Ukraine as we speak. I'm talking with some people that are, on the ground in that regard. And, I mean... To my knowledge, and I could be wrong, but to my knowledge, what's happening on the ground is very different than what's being reported in Europe, and more so particularly in the West. Again, I could be wrong, just saying that for the sake of YouTube, but yeah, we'll leave that there. The next thing is that China, according to Reuters or Reuters.com, China has used its vast COVID surveillance infrastructure to stifle protests by turning people's health QR codes red. Again, for those that are on the Patreon, you'll know that we've discussed the potentialities of what is called dual-use capabilities and capabilization, and methods and techniques. I was going to say mechaniques, or yeah, methaniques, mixing method and techniques. But yeah, this is definitely something that, without getting into the tinfoil hat category, is absolutely something that is a very realistic possibility if the checks and balances are either not in place or if they're not legitimately enforced checks and balances, particularly in a country like China with the CCP. Again, not the Chinese people, but the CCP more so in this regard. Actually, entirely so in this regard. The next thing is that the World Health Organization, or the WHO, will convene an emergency committee next week to determine whether the monkeypox outbreak represents a health emergency of international concern. Going to leave that there. The next thing is that the Biden administration has announced the release of another 45 million barrels of crude oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The reserves are now drained to a 35-year low. I'm going to leave that there too, because I don't know what to say at this point, because again, this leads into speculation and, potentially using, our imagination and things like that. And then that could lead down a whole number of routes that would then, by definition, lean to some type of emotionally driven viewpoint that I do not want to enforce. So, the next thing is that, look, honestly, Biden went on Jimmy Kimmel and the guy was stumbling like crazy. And I'm not saying that because he's a Democrat. I would say that as well, to be fair, if it was Trump too. But we have to call it, for me, human on human. Did I see a human who couldn't put together a sentence? Honestly, yeah. Does that concern me on the surface? Theoretically, it's supposed to. But when we look even slightly behind the quote-unquote metaphorical curtains, it just speaks to, is not Biden specifically, but does the quote-unquote placeholder presidency seat, end quote, really have as much of a prominent influence as we've been led to believe, as a society? Just makes you think. I'm not trying to get any of you folks to lean in either direction. I could be very wrong. I could be very correct. I don't know. The next thing is that Canada has declared that fully vaccinated now means 3 injections because 2 doses won't work anymore. Again, I'm going to leave that there. The next thing is that China is ready to back Russia on, quote, sovereignty and security matters, end quote, President Xi assured President Putin in a phone call. Again, I see, chess game, and the only ones that suffer are you and I. And the ones, for example, the people in Taiwan, the people in Ukraine, and relative to that of the even the people in China, the people in Russia, the people in America, dare I say, because then there's the attempted blame game on different economic provisions that seem to lead to alleged gas price increases and things like that. So again, I'm just going to leave that there. But to me, big picture, strategy, tit for tat, push, pull. The question becomes, when does it end, and to what cost and at what cost? Truly. The next thing is that the U.S. Federal Reserve has raised interest rates by 75 basis points to 1.75%, the largest hike since 1994. Again, I'm not an economist. I don't mean to, say I know what's going on in this regard, because I truly don't. When it comes to the stock market, the economy, I'll be honest with you, I kind of just sit back and observe. If I'm being completely honest with you, I don't really go past that, because I don't particularly have an interest, let alone, it's not just that, it's that for me, it's very simple. The market goes up and the market goes down. So, I'm not trying to say that it is not a difficult thing to read. I'm sure that it is, but I think that if one can understand more elements of philosophy and science and ontology and things like this, I think there, even dare I say, more of what we coin as a spiritual resemblance to that of what we call mass consciousness or life or something like this. We can understand the market more so. Just my 2 cents. The final thing is that Boris Johnson's ethics advisor, Lord Geit, has resigned after saying there was a, quote, legitimate question, quote, over whether the Prime Minister had broken ministerial rules over Partygate. He said he was leaving the role, which he took up in April last year, quote, with regret. End quote. Lord Geit did not give a reason for his departure, but in a statement he said it was the, quote, right thing to do, end quote. It comes a day after he spoke of, quote, frustrations, end quote, with the Prime Minister's actions. I mean, we've seen it. I mean, it's just that the thing is that regardless of political affiliation and party, regardless of the each respective country around the world, we've seen in the last 2 years, people have had their fair share of resignations. Whether it's, truth be told, if I'm not mistaken, the FDA, I think, if not, it was either the FDA, the CDC, or both, or one or the other, forgive me. Whether it's that, whether it's politicians around the world stepping down, whether it's ones criticizing my Prime Minister Trudeau for, the way he treated the whole trucker protest. We've seen the fair share of it. I mean, whether it's, tens of thousands of doctors signing the, forgive me, what this was called, the, something, it's on the tip of my tongue. Forgive me, guys. I think the Great Barrington Declaration, saying that the lockdowns would do more damage than good, particularly for younger adults and children with the mental health, something like this. So again, you have your handful of individuals willing to speak out, but the question for me then becomes, to what extent are they willing to speak out regarding the justification behind their actions? Because if they don't, then we're left in the dark to speculate. So again, then we're kind of stuck at square one, which then kind of takes me to, it's better off focusing what's right in front of you in your life and with what you want to do in your life, compared to speculating and just listening to me ramble away, especially near the end of a news report in that regard. So, and I really do mean that, as I say, just because I'm behind the microphone doesn't make me any better, nor, to be fair, worse than any of you folks. So again, as always, folks, that's it for today. We will have another Kraken coming at you this Friday. We will do another fresh roundup of potential developments that will be occurring over the next 48 hours. And I truly want to thank you so very much, folks. Again, friendly reminder, this coming Friday, June the 17th, I believe. Yes, today's the 15th, June the 17th at 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will be having a multi-hour rabbit hole deep dive live stream. It's going to be on some very exciting stuff. So we'll catch you all there, folks. Cheers.